7 p.m., March 29th. We have an agenda before us. The first thing, which frankly is routine but not on the agenda, is the approval of the minutes that Ken yet again produced.
I move we approve the minutes.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Presuming there's no discussion. Thank you. And any against? I assume also no. Okay. I think at this point we need to, as I indicated on the agenda, very briefly go over the status that we had discussed in the meeting with regard to Conveo, the new website that has been put together by BSC. So there were 2 or 3 things that had to happen. One of them was for print media going out to the Stowe Bolton Independent and also going out to the Item. Stasha did a great job on that. Hopefully those of you who did see the one in the Independent. I haven't seen anything yet in the Item, but expect we'll see something on Friday, as Ken Cleveland likes to rewrite stories that he receives. Ed, how are things going in the world of social media?
Well, we've got the link to the Conveo with the QR code in the master plan website. The Instagram, I talked with Nikki McGlatchy a little bit about just, media presentation. And I guess the question is, what do we expect from something like Instagram? I think Nikki and I both share the feeling that the medium doesn't seem to be the right kind of thing for something as, unfortunately, I hate to say it, boring. It's not somebody's animals. It's not somebody's kittens. It's not a birthday party. What are we trying to achieve with a thing like an Instagram as opposed to a website, which makes a lot more sense?
No, Instagram was intended for what had been said by both of our interns 2 years ago to be a vector, and that's it. Not to provide any detailed information, but simply say for those who use Instagram, of which there are quite a few people, particularly in the high school and young college age group at this point, although that's waning, I believe, but guide them to the website. And I think that was the only intent.
So
But
the
I
QR
gather
code
you,
should be there. It's been placed on Instagram.
but you had talked also about the importance of Facebook and Bolton community social media.
Right. So the master plan Facebook has our QR code. And then I guess the question is, do we want to post something on the community? And what message do we have any particular message or text for the community website of Bolton?
Well, I'm not sure we need anything more than what we put up earlier. It doesn't have to be very long, but it has to get people who are on the community website to go to Conveo, because that's where we really want to collect information and have a sufficient amount of detail so they can understand what's going on.
Okay.
Ed, can I jump in? Sorry, I just got here.
Oh, please.
And forgive me if this is impertinent, but I'm hearing what you're saying, and I'm wondering if the language that just got published in the Bolton Independent, I have that in digital form, and I'd be happy to send it. And that had the information, like the Conveo website and kind of what we're trying to do. So it might, people might recognize it as something they've already read in the paper, but it would be another. It's just basically the jumpstart information that Ken and I put into the paper this week.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay.
So Stasha, if you can send that to Ed.
Yep.
And let's put that up wherever we can.
All right.
It is a nice summary that hopefully will give people a little bit of interest in going the next step.
Okay.
Olivia, I hope you've been monitoring any kind of input from people on Conveo. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, sure. I'll actually share my disabled participant screen sharing. It's just a little graphic that shows activity on the survey, but I can summarize it. So essentially there have been only 11.
Olivia, you can
Um,
share now. I went ahead
oh.
and authorized them.
Okay.
Yeah, go for it.
Let's see. Nothing too crazy, but there have been 11 total participants taking the survey. Not sure why it just says one here, but there are 11 recorded surveys that have been taken. I'm assuming this is probably a steering committee member from when we kind of sent it out for a test a while ago. And then I believe the website was posted on Facebook March 21st, 20th. So that would give us a bit of a spike in the traffic that we've seen. But it has kind of waned a little bit. So yeah, continuing on with what Bob was saying, I think it's going to be important to continually be posting and finding different vehicles for getting the word out to people, whether that's reaching out to some of the stakeholders we identified who can send it through their networks, sending it to other folks that might even work for the town who can distribute that. Yeah, finding just creative ways to get the word out.
Well, Ed, if you could get back to us on when you put it up on Nextdoor Bolton,
All right.
it would be very interesting to see when that happens based on what my
Mhm.
beloved wife tells me about going on with Nextdoor Bolton. There's lots and lots of conversation about lots and lots.
That's true. Yes. Okay.
Mostly the cost of electricity right now.
It's huge.
Hmm.
That and Concord's freedom plan or something about revolution in taxes. It seems to be another issue that's going on and on and on.
No, we live here.
I agree.
Okay, good. Another thing, and it's off topic ever so slightly, but I think it's important. I don't know if any of you or all of you have been watching the proceedings of the Neshoba Regional High School Building Committee, but I urge you to stay in touch with that, because that is financially and in terms of education the most significant thing that'll happen to this town and the towns on either side of us for many years to come. And not only understand what's going on, but at this point it's critical as individuals and maybe as a master planning committee to get back to them. The time is short. As you know, in the summer there'll be a multi-town vote, and Brian, you probably know way more about that than I do. But one of the things that's come up I've been shooting emails back and forth to Kirk Downing and the architects, and they pointed out that they're in what is referred to as the schematic stage of the design, which to some people means, well, this is a stick figure and it's not significant. It's terribly significant, because there will be 2 cost estimates by independent cost estimators on that particular design. And then when that is voted on, that is what is locked in to state funding. So don't wait around a lot. If you have good comments, I urge you to get back to the committee and let them know what you think.
Okay.
Okay, Heather, Olivia, we had a conversation a week ago Monday, and several things came up, one of which is Dropbox is inaccessible for most people on Earth, and certainly on this committee. And that, in fact, is correct, and it almost happened to me. And we need out of Dropbox the information that I believe, Heather, you spent a lot of time, I don't know, 6 or 8 months ago going through Dropbox and identifying stuff, but it's critically important now to be able to pull that stuff down. So what we had talked about was extracting a fair amount of the more voluminous information in the archive files, and then leaving it at a much smaller volume so that people can get in. Nice in theory. I gave it the old college try, and I have decided there's a different way of doing it. I'm going into particle astrophysics and create a parallel but smaller universe. And basically, what I've done is download everything, all 1,200 files, out of Dropbox in the format that they're currently in. And I'm now going through that on my own computer, and then I will bring those back up in probably a separate Dropbox folder for the steering committee and task groups. It's very substantially reduced. And then delete everybody's access to the old one, since they can't get into it anyway, and give you access to the new, much smaller version. However, having said that, there is a lot of very useful information that is pretty voluminous in the old one. So as I said, downloaded it, and I have all of it, and it's not going to be lost. But what else I've done is downloaded it to a thumb drive. It's amazing how large thumb drives are these days.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I will use a technology that is now 30 years old, referred to as SneakerNet, in which case I will take my little thumb drive, stuff it in an envelope, and send it off to you. And then you will have everything and have access to it all. So that's the game plan. I've already done that. Heather, I need from you or Olivia an address that I can send it to. I'll send it out tomorrow. You'll have access to that. But I think it'll contain everything you need.
Okay.
But we can get on to the discussion about the other side of that conversation, which was individual section objectives.
Sure. Olivia has prepared some slides. So
Okay.
Right. So last week, Bob and Todd met with Heather and I, and we had identified many of the major findings and goals that we could pull from existing reports and plans from the Dropbox, and then also from the steering committee task reports, as well as public engagement. So we had identified in one document many potential goals. It's a very long document, so that's something that we're going to have to consider when identifying draft goals. We have also drafted a historical and regional context statement to provide more context to the master plan itself and what has happened since the last master plan has been produced. We have synthesized your prior public engagement efforts, some of the community aspirations that have been pulled from public engagement, the SWOT analysis, and key topics that have been identified by the Master Plan Steering Committee. And we also began drafting existing conditions language for the individual chapters. What's still in the works is our GIS team is drafting many of the important maps, which will give us a lot of insight to current land use and the town's conditions. We are also creating visuals to accompany data, so we can intersperse those in the report and provide more visuals, narrow down the potential draft goals, which I mentioned before we had pulled from the relevant reports and plans. And we are still seeking a little bit more information on the municipal schools to inform the plan. But like you mentioned, the new school is in the works, so that will definitely be a big portion of it.
I think it is important, though, that we get our own K through 8 schools and a fair amount of information. So if you can let me know what you're looking for, I can get with Joe Bates, and he generally has a fair amount of information prepared that we can provide you on where that has been, where it's going, projections on student population, facilities, teaching staff, etc.
Great. Yeah, the state provides a lot of data as well, but maybe some more local and regional context and knowledge would be better to include in there.
I like the idea of the municipality talking about themselves as opposed to the state talking about them.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
We need to, compare the two and develop it. Brian, you had a question?
I just wanted to flag something related to this, and I could be a little out of date in what I'm about to say, but I think at some point I had heard that the population projections that the high school building committee has been using in their work don't necessarily incorporate potential changes in town populations from either approved or likely to be approved new housing. So I'm thinking specifically of like 580 Main Street, which is going to be going online, and Todd could update on this, but I mean, they're going to be working on that, within the next year, and probably residents will be moving in within a couple of years. So I just wanted to flag that as like a area of data uncertainty, I guess.
Mhm.
I agree 100%. I was at one of the early seminars, and the additional student number was pegged at 50, and which I could not believe for the costs that they're talking about. 50 is something that it just doesn't seem to make any sense for something that's, I don't know, what's our projection here? Is this a 30-year new high school? It's insane. That doesn't make any sense.
Well, yeah, that's a good point. And I believe, at the same presentation.
You bet.
And
Yes.
they said that that was what they had provided was the cutoff date prior to the approval of 580 Main Street,
Right.
and that's where that number was coming from. And then, in fact, the number was really going to be substantially larger than that. And I think what piqued my interest was the fact that the number that they had provided to the state was going to be the basis of state funding, not the real number. And
Right.
that's, Brian, have you heard anything more about that?
No, and I didn't want to get us too bogged down in it, but I just wanted to flag that may be something that folks on this committee need to help drill into to get the information to BSC.
Right.
And, it was my understanding that when we were talking about the estimate of the number of kids that go into this kind of development or come out of this kind of development, and I think we were more looking at grade school kids, but they estimated that with the development of this many apartments and so on, that you could probably get around an increase of 50 kids. But that was only for that development. It
Right.
had nothing to do with the rest of the town.
Right.
So and I think, certainly that's going to be of interest, and I wouldn't be at all surprised if Joel Bates is very much aware of that and concerned about it. But we do have a number of developments that are on their way that Todd is well aware of.
Yeah.
Dasha, you have your hand up.
Thank you. I would love to be, I just wanted to say I would love to be a part of that conversation when it happens. I've read extensively, because it's very hard, read extensively on trying to nail down a number for 229 units of this type of housing to try to get a realistic number there. And it's very hard because you can't, I had looked at Paddock Estates, but due to confidentiality issues and such, you can't really go in there and say, how many kids do you have in this place? And the data that's out there estimates that between 10 and 15% of the total. There's an algorithm, and I don't want to misspeak, but I have it in my notes. And so I just wanted to say that number looks like it might be low. So for all the data that's out there, I think it really warrants an in-depth, data-filled conversation to get a grip on that, with the idea that we've got a new high school coming online eventually, but also our grade school is going to realize potential flux of significant portion. Thank you. That's it.
Okay, so this is fairly urgent, I think, at this point. So I would suggest that Stasha, Penny, because you've been involved in the schools, and I would be delighted to get involved and get together, possibly set up a meeting, not necessarily for tomorrow, but set the meeting up tomorrow to discuss how we're going to go about this and come
That's
up with a
fine.
better estimate.
Sure.
That's fine.
Okay, so anybody else interested in that? Okay,
Wow.
so the three of us will pull that together, and with the information you have, Stasha,
Yeah.
as well as hopefully what Joel is thinking about we can get a better idea. And then Todd, we probably ought to have a conversation about a projection of developments in Bolton. I've heard rumors, well, you and I know about one that is definitely on its way, and there is another 17 house development at north end of town that is rumbling.
Yeah.
On Randall Road. So just those two in themselves are not insignificant.
Agreed. Yeah, we can have that conversation anytime you like.
Okay, great.
right.
Okay, I'm sorry, I interrupted the flow of this conversation.
No worries. I'm glad it came up. It's definitely really important. So just continuing on with the existing conditions that we've been analyzing. The three task group reports that I was able to find in the Dropbox were the water and sewer, transportation, and climate change, which were all very informative. So I worked through those and incorporated them, and we'll be definitely looking for ways to incorporate that in the master plan itself, because you guys did a lot of work, and it should definitely be included. And then also have worked through, for the most part, this list of reports here, and then also a variety of others, but for the most part, this is the bulk of them, as well as the Backyard Bolton survey. So, but if there's any other task group reports that I may have missed in the Dropbox, that would definitely be very helpful to know. For the most part, a lot of the other documents that I found were more summaries of and future intentions that task groups were looking to initiate. But for the most part, these were the three that had a lot of meat to them. So I pulled them specifically.
You seem
Okay,
to be
there is
missing the
one other
report
that
on the
is-
buildings in Bolton, done by the DPW.
Yes, I have that report,
And
which will
that's
definitely be
the most
included.
recent one.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes, I
okay.
have that one.
This is the building maintenance assessment report.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, good. Now, there was a report that was presented by Rebecca and her folks to the selectmen, I believe last week, and I was on it, about changes that are being recommended for zoning bylaws and regulations for climate change mitigation. And they had very specific things that they wanted to see. So let me get Rebecca to get you that report.
Yeah, that would
It
be
was a
great.
presentation, but it was a fairly detailed spreadsheet of each bylaw and regulation and what should be taken into consideration. For my money, pretty practical.
Yes, that would be great to include. Working through the zoning bylaws, I've been pulling a lot of the overlay districts, historical protections, land conservation protections, so that we can provide definitions and walk through all of those, which will help for our build out analysis too.
The other thing that is looming, and Harvard is about, I believe, about to implement it, having talked to the Harvard planner in the last couple of weeks, is open space residential development regulation, which is a much more forward-thinking approach. Not that we have done great things with our phosphates, but this is beyond phosphate and looks at innovative ways of having multi-unit housing and fitting it into the landscape and the environment much better. So that's another thing that I'll be looking at, and Todd and I have discussed.
Oh, yes.
Bob,
Excited for that.
Bob, can you send the Rebecca's document to the rest of us also?
Yeah, sure, I'll send it out there.
And really, the thing in Harvard would probably be interesting to everybody else too.
Yep. Yeah, and that's something, it has not been very fast paced. I think part of it's been COVID, but it started 3 years ago, and Ned and I both went to the original presentations in Harvard. And it was a collaborative effort with both developers and residents and the planning department at Harvard, as well as the Harvard Conservation Trust. but I have a fair amount of information, and I have, and Stosh has seen it, the book that the guy who did the presentation and coordinated the seminar and the workshop, Randall Arendt, put together. So that's something I in particular feel is important to planning, and certainly in the time frame that we're talking about. So we'll
Just so
get
you
you
know-
those two things.
Oh, sorry, I was just saying, just so you know, Bob, I've been tearing into that in my spare time with Little Remains.
It's fairly awe-inspiring.
Yeah, it's I've reached out to one. I don't want to get too far off into the weeds, but I was talking to my mentor, Alan Gordon, regarding him, and he knows Mr. Aaron quite well. So he was heavily encouraging us to retain Randall's services whenever he has a free moment to present to us.
Well, I've gotten ahead of it. I already have a scope of work that he sent me
Lovely, love it.
and a
Either way,
budget.
sorry.
Anyway, but again, I think there's a great deal of process and perspective that we can learn from Harvard, because they did go through a long and painful process, but it was, in the end, they're very happy it was collaborative, as opposed to shoving it down the throats of the developers who would frankly ignore it if they didn't have to. Okay, enough said.
Okay. So kind of a bit of a summary and what's next as far as public engagement, continuing our efforts. The general objective for where we're at right now is to provide a good framework for identifying the master plan goals and what recommendations are going to provide the best future for Bolton. So as I mentioned, review goals pulled from existing plans and reports. That has been accomplished. Meet with the steering committee task groups and stakeholders as we see fit to kind of work through those draft goals and then begin to outline them for the master plan, which will be helpful in the future for public engagement. Promoting the community survey more, potentially planning a community mapping exercise, kind of identifying areas of concern, places of interest, and also give an opportunity for people to provide ideas and suggestions, and attend targeted outreach events. I know we briefly talked about going to the Backyard Bolton event on May 13th. And then I personally would be happy to attend and talk about the master plan, get folks more involved, promote Conveo and the survey and the photo submission process that we're doing. And then some other potential outreach questions for mapping are where folks might think new development might be fitting, where new housing might be most appropriate, and then where preservation or natural resources should be prioritized.
Let me add to the housing discussion, and Sasha can be sure jump in on this. In addition to what areas of town, I'm very interested, and I think we all should be, about what type of housing.
Yes.
Right.
In a very broad sense, because those of us on the planning board, I think at this point realize that the Leviton approach to A&R lots that we currently use in Bolton is not appropriate for Bolton anywhere near as it's appropriate for Leviton, New Jersey. We have a very
Agreed.
different environment. We have a very different type of landscaping and very different character. But
Yes.
I think it would be nice to hear from people what they would like in the way of housing,
Yeah.
and
Agreed.
multi-unit housing as well.
Definitely.
Yeah, any added diversification of housing stock would be appropriate here.
The other thing that people, and I'm glad you mentioned the mapping exercise. People love maps, and if we could get 2 or 3 of the maps that have been put together over the last year or so that Valerie and Rebecca have done in very large format. And now that we have a large format printer in Town Hall, we
Right.
can do that.
Right.
Large format color printer, I might add.
Yes, yes, you have the plotter.
Yep.
Beautiful machine.
Are these like general maps of the town or mapping something specific?
Oh, no, they're very specific. I mean, there is, the ones that come to mind are soil, as applies to agricultural and development use, appropriateness. Certainly wetlands always is very surprising to people. There are others that allude to the development or developable land in terms of slopes and that sort of thing. So it would be a good idea to take a look at the number that have already been produced, perhaps simplify them a little bit because some of them are complicated, generalize some of them, combine some of the categories a little bit so your eyes don't burn out looking at them, and then put those up for people to take a look at. They really, I think a lot of people are very surprised and very interested in what's out there and frankly, what the limitations are and what the advantages are in terms of both development and agriculture and other things, open space as well.
Can I add to that, Bob?
Yep.
Just in that same vein that where a picture says 1,000 words, I think if we're, even if it's in a different forum, if we're going to ask folks, and I think we should kind of what you know, if we're looking at increasing density at all of housing, which I say that very slowly and painfully because I know that's such a difficult kind of thing to wrap our heads around sometimes, at least for me. You know, if we're going to increase density, I think understanding that the trade-off there is that we're preserving wetlands, or we're trying to preserve historical sites, or you know, this idea that the density, there's a balance there where there's something that Bolton gains in that process, and showing the comparison of, hey, under our current bylaws, this is what we're setting ourselves up for. Like, for example, Meadow Road, those lots up on Meadow Road that are getting developed, or the phosphorids that are spread out and then have like these really non-ideal open space allowances that the developer has given back. You know, if we're really truly looking to work with developers, this is what it can look like. And I think it was hard for me anyway to wrap my head around how density could be a good thing, or how we could promote that, and yet understanding the need for housing, et cetera, et cetera. I really had to do a lot of research, and the picture said 1,000 words. So I would just put that out there that when we decide to have that discussion with the public, I think we really should show some kind of if-then comparisons.
Yeah, and that's the reason I'd really like to get Randall Arendt down here for a real workshop and seminar, because the stuff that he has done and what he presents in terms of a charrette approach of what would happen if we continue to use even phosphor planning compared to what can be done with actually substantially increased density that looks a whole lot better and preserves a whole lot more of the land and character than the way that we're currently doing business. So yeah, absolutely. And as you know, Stasha, he has a whole bunch of before and after pictures.
Right. His book is very effective that way. I think we need to show Bolton what's happened in Bolton, frankly. You know, it's very easy to see if you look at a map of the phosphorids that are developed. You know, here's the open space, and here's where the houses went, and here's where the water is, and here's where the resources are, and here's the old farmhouse that got knocked down. And you know, very quickly you can start to see why something needs to change, or we're just going to eat up the rest of the land.
Yep. Okay, point made. We'll work on that.
Thank you.
Sounds great. Yeah, and I think once we have our build out analysis and everything mapped for that, that will also be a great visual to show people kind of where that trade-off actually exists. And then finally, just wanted to show these again to you guys, just kind of some visuals that we created to tell people a little bit about the material that exists in each chapter, a little bit of background information and existing conditions for people to kind of familiarize themselves with the material just a little bit. And also they're something to look at and could be posted on social media as a reminder that this is ongoing, and it's another way to plug the Conveo site and get people involved.
How do you suggest, I mean, there's a lot of information in this. how do you suggest that something like this, either in whole or piecemeal, be put out on social media?
Yeah, so these are all separate infographics. And I have others as well, but I just kind of pasted them on one to show you. It's very hard to see here. But I would just suggest, I think in Facebook they allow large format. And then as well as I could post them on the Conveo site themselves. Or hard copies are also something that you could provide, but it is limited to, being in a certain location, having physical copies. And then Instagram, I think because these are large format, they wouldn't necessarily be a great fit for there. But it seems like a lot of folks prefer Facebook, and I think that would be a easy medium to post these on.
Yeah,
Would
and I
we
think
go back to the website as a logical way to present the information, that we would have links, or are we actually trying to put some of the graphics on Facebook itself?
I think putting the graphics on Facebook themselves would kind of get a conversation started, and maybe actually show people the material and, give them a little bit of an introduction and something to think about. And it might even prompt them to mosey over to the website if they have a strong feeling or thought about something or want to learn more.
Okay.
Well, if we could do this sort of in sequence and characterize it as, a vibrant master planning process informing the populace as we go through the process, and put out a sequence of these, as we actually had discussed probably 2.5 years ago and had done. But it would be nice just to provide some continuity and encourage interest with something new every X number of weeks.
And you can easily put the link in with whatever you have. So you could have the map or one of those graphs, have a paragraph written about it, and then say, if you want more information, go here, and then it'll take you there.
Yep.
So it's quite useful and easy to do that, I think.
Yeah. People like something that's bright and informative and brief at the same time. So I think it might be helpful for getting more information out there.
And what
Yeah.
I think that we can certainly pull things together for you and say, week 1, roll out this, week 2, roll out that, based on the information that's been pulled together and some of the graphics. We could always break it out so that it's one kind of like open space and recreation, something about the open space inventory, and then rotate through the different other elements of master plan and come back to open space with another piece of that, and kind of just keep hitting where people can see it and it's front of mind. And after they've seen it a couple of times, if they haven't gone to the website, they may say, oh, you know what, maybe I should just check out this website. So that's kind of our approach in thinking about how to get more content out there in front of everyone.
Yeah, if you could, I think it'd be great to have something like what you just said, elements of master planning or whatever, and keep repeating that with a new topic, just so, give it a little bit of branding in addition to the master plan.
Also be good to have an article, paragraph or whatever, with a link to the survey, because we got a pretty good response several years ago. And I think so far there has not been much publicity about it. And I think that's one way to do it, is to get stuff into Facebook and then also work through Todd, I guess, to get something into the Bolton MA email string that goes out to some people in town, and just push that in it and say, we're updating the survey, and so here's the place you can go to get it. And that's gonna generate way more than have filled in so far.
Well, Heather, Olivia, could you put together something fairly brief, as Ken said, that also highlights the survey? Because he's right.
Yeah, absolutely.
We haven't had the kind of visibility we need for that. And it's a good survey. Website's great. It's
Yeah.
just, getting the horses to water. Then they will.
Right.
drink.
Absolutely.
When do town warrants go out? Can we send it out with town warrants?
Um,
that
Brian,
too
do you
soon?
know?
I think nowadays the town warrant goes out in the Independent
Oh,
to
yeah.
everyone. That's what they
Oh.
did last year, and I believe.
Oh, like we're
I
not gonna
believe
get a
that's the
book
way they
anymore?
do it.
No, the book comes
The
in a
book comes
free
within the
copy.
paper and they work it out with them so
Oh,
that they
okay.
deliver to everybody, whether
Mhm.
you're a subscriber or not.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, that's lovely that they set it up that way. Okay, never
Yeah.
mind. I was just thinking it might be a good way to get it out.
Well, but
But maybe it's something.
that's another place to put the surveys in, or put
Yeah.
the note to the surveys in those papers.
Well, if we talk to Cindy about that, I'm sure she would be able to accommodate us, her
Yeah.
own way.
Yeah, easily, just send her a note on the thing and say, would you put it in? And she could take care of that easily.
So Olivia, if you could get a little bit of a graphic for the survey
Yeah.
together, with the QR code and so forth, and I'll be glad to send that over to Cindy and see what I can do. Oh, yeah, and as Mary said, in the COA newsletter as well.
That's a good idea. Yeah.
Mhm.
I just wanted to mention, I think if we're gonna have a presence at Backyard Bolton, I know that's on our agenda to discuss, but it'd be great if we could have like a big QR code. And like if I were at Backyard Bolton, I would berate people and be like, open up your phone and scan this and take the survey and
Yeah.
have a piece of candy.
Yeah, we did that a year or two ago and we had hard copies there that some people filled out, and then the hard copies were a small number compared with the total number of people who did the survey, but they were still consequential, and it was interesting and fun talking to some people about it, things like that. So yeah, that we can certainly redo that.
Yep.
Yeah, I think hard copies are definitely important to have too.
Yeah, but make the QR code big enough so people can photograph it 3 people away.
Mhm.
Also
Big
put in the
poster.
link, but put the link in because not everybody understands or easily uses QR codes.
Right.
Mhm.
So have the link in whatever publicity we have as well.
Yeah,
Although we're
definitely.
discovering that with the Bolton Trail Guides, everybody uses QR codes now. Pretty impressive.
Well, that's good, but I don't think that's necessarily true for all the public though.
That's
Right.
true.
Right.
Okay, we were gonna talk about master plan representation at Backyard Bolton. It's on the 13th of May, I believe. We can talk more about that next month in specific and who's gonna be there. I think I can certainly be there. Anybody else? Heather, Brian?
Yeah, I can't be there because I've got a book sale that day.
I could likely make that as well.
Okay. Good.
Is
So we
there
got-
a registration date or anything, or is it pretty informal?
No, you need to let Backyard Bolton know that you're gonna be there.
Cool.
And, you're expected to bring your tent and all your PR and
Mhm.
presentation and handouts and candy and whatever
You
else.
need information on how to get to Backyard Bolton.
They gave us a tent they gave us a space last year. We didn't even have to pay for it.
Right.
So I think that it's just a matter that one party from the master plan just needs to tell them that we want to be there.
Well, is
and-
Eric Nyland still running the show?
I assume
I think
so.
so.
So we just tell him that
Yes, he is.
and he'll let us in there. And we don't have to have each person who works be identified to them. It's just
No,
No, all
identified
they
to
care about
ourselves
is
so
we
that
want
know
we
we've
want
got
a space to
somebody
put a
there.
table, but we need a table and we need a tent.
Oh,
You gotta
oh,
have
in
a
the
tent.
pavilion.
yeah,
We could have the pavilion,
Yeah, we did the pavilion last time.
right?
We
just-
moved you to the
That worked
pavilion
okay.
last time.
Well,
Well, I know, but it worked.
exactly.
though.
That's fine. That's fine.
okay, so Todd, since Eric and I are comrades on the planning board, I guess it's up to me to talk to him.
Yeah, talk to Eric.
Okay, I'll
And
do
ask
that.
them if they can have the pavilion. Saves the tent and the table.
Yeah. Is that enough space?
Oh,
sorry.
yes. Oh, yeah.
It should be fine.
Okay, so the one last thing is the task group objectives. I know that Olivia and Heather have identified a bunch of those, but maybe we need, we have a lot of experience in putting these objectives together. Brian's also done a yeoman's job of getting a lot more detail into them, but maybe it's time to regroup on an individual task group basis and review what you've got and add what we feel is necessary and do a little bit of prioritizing of what those objectives are. So Olivia, do you had objectives? Do you want to send those out and I will coordinate?
Yeah, I can send those out.
Sending-
And then also once you send over the report from, was it Rebecca? I can include those objectives and
Right.
goals as well. And then I can send it out so it'll all be in one document.
And there, in addition to that very recent report, obviously, the municipal vulnerability report and so forth, the previous reports over the last 3 years
Mhm.
have also identified a number of things that can be done on a municipal planning level.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry,
Right.
yeah, and by the way, Ed's hand is up. I don't know if that's just a holdover.
No,
Oh, so
sweet.
Ed, did you want to, you can go first because you've had.
Yeah,
your hand
maybe,
up.
maybe this will be directed to you, Brian. I guess an issue I can't seem to let go. When I was selectman 25 years ago, I tried to have a groundwater study committee. Is there an assumption that as much development apparently as seems to be coming down the track toward us, there is never a question of groundwater being limited, that in New England, in Worcester County, there's just no evidence that, anybody's groundwater is going to be emptied by some great big development anywhere. Do we know that? Has that ever come up in planning board hearings, that there's a study of the aquifer underneath a certain, big area, especially like a 580 Main Street? Does it ever come up? Is it even legal to discuss that?
Sure it is. And
Okay.
yeah, and it has come up.
All right.
And water and sewer actually did a fair amount of research on that, where the aquifers were. And I think the next step is to take that information into consideration in continued planning, both residential and commercial planning. But there's a huge amount of detail that we generated in that, including groundwater elevations, distance to groundwater, the difference between rock drilled wells and gravel wells, and all the rest of that. But to your point, one of the things that we had talked with land use was our focused area review. And
Right.
one of the things that came out of that was overlaying the aquifer to the best knowledge of the well drillers in the state, and they do keep all that data to make sure it works. So yes, the other part of that obviously is the whole issue of public water supply. Should this ultimately be considered in areas down around the bottom of Forbush Mill Road, where the aquifer is literally artesian, and be used as a basis for the entire town, or should we have separate ones? The next question came up, and I spent a fair amount of time talking to Lancaster when they expanded their public water supply. Oh, by the way, in the same location.
Uh-huh.
And their comment was, talk about public water supply for potable water is interesting, but the amount of money that goes into digging trenches to put potable water in, you're crazy if you don't put fire water in at the same time. So yes, we've got a lot of data, but that ought to be a strong recommendation. And it did come out. If you go into the report that we put together, that's, let's see, still on Dropbox, on recommendations in that direction.
Said another way, the planning board has never denied a development based on a belief of lack of adequate water for
No.
the plot, whatever. Okay.
No, but there has been some concern about that, but for reasons that aren't just lack of water supply or lack of groundwater elevation. There have been a number of places in Bolton where they've drilled much, much deeper wells, and you hear about wells that used to be 100 feet deep,
Right.
and they fracked them, and that wasn't good enough, and now they're 400 feet deep. Well, the reason they've done it, and the well drillers will all tell you this, is not to go down to water deeper. It's to develop a reservoir 8 inches in diameter and 400 feet deep that provides water even on cracked rock that will, dare I say it, water your 1 acre lawn, which is another issue.
Yeah, terrible. Terrible.
Yeah. And Mark Sprague did a report on that and basically recommended that we completely rethink even private irrigation.
Indeed. Indeed.
Brian?
Yeah, so I just I had a clarifying question and then maybe an actual question. So when Olivia was using the word objectives, task group objectives, I wasn't sure I knew what you meant by that. So could you just explain?
Sure. Yeah, I guess in my mind, identifying task group objectives just meant identifying how your role kind of influences us identifying goals in the future, because obviously you guys play a huge role in that. So whether that's us meeting with task groups, steering committee members, or us meeting with other stakeholders to do that, and then just generally organizing outreach. That's just what I meant from objectives.
Got it. No, that's really helpful. And I'll just I'll share like my own personal thoughts and see if this resonates with anybody else. I feel like our original task groups have kind of, I don't want to say dissolved, but like we're not like working in a concerted effort on anything because the pen is sort of in the hands of BSC. And I think that's fine. But what I think would be really awesome is that if you guys realize, oh, we actually have some homework that we would really like the steering committee to do. And I thought objectives meant homework, which I'm great with. But like, if there are things where you're like, oh, we really need them to maybe tackle this or help us figure out how we should tackle it, packaging that up in ways that we can talk about in a meeting and then divide, because I don't think it's necessarily gonna like,
Right.
I don't know that we're necessarily going to have like an existing task group to take it on, but maybe we just have little informal raise your hand if you want to take that on sort of a thing. I don't know if that makes
Sure.
sense to other folks.
Yeah, that makes
Makes
sense to me. I also was thinking that that was also a possibility, and that in identifying these draft goals, it could be something that, we're proposing different goals and, trying to get your feedback on them and like workshopping that a little bit before we actually identify a real set of draft goals, because I know you guys have done a considerable amount of work already. So we just want you to like be, not feel like your work was, for nothing, because it definitely wasn't. And it's been very helpful so far.
Just to clarify that a little bit, though, the original goals of the task groups were the goals of what they wanted to accomplish within the scope of their task group, as opposed to, I think you're thinking more about the goals that they feel are important coming out of that experience.
Right.
So I think that that's something that may be in the minds of a lot of people, but I don't think it's, with very few exceptions, been articulated as such. And maybe it is worthwhile spending time with each one of the task groups, going over what they have come up with and talking about, based on that, what they believe the goals of that component of the master plan should be. Brian, do you agree with that or?
I think it feels a little abstract because I don't like, I don't know exactly what BSC is going to be sending to us, but I'll just give you a hypothetical. Let's say they've gotten pretty far on like a chapter or something, and they have a bunch of potential strategies and goals that they're considering including in the plan, but either they need more information because maybe there's some stuff that they haven't reviewed yet, or they need feedback on the strategies and potential goals. In my mind, we're kind of at a point now where I feel like just bring it to the whole steering committee, and we get volunteers to review those pieces, because I'm not sure like who is on the housing task group at this point, who is on, you know what I mean? Like, I think it's probably
You're
Stasha,
looking at it.
right? He's like, and so I feel like,
Right.
I don't know. I don't know if I'm speaking out of turn, but it just seems like, do you understand, Stasha, what I'm saying? I'm not sure if I'm expressing it well.
Yeah,
but-
no, I think that just a lot has happened over the last couple of years, and so we're in a much different place with and we're using the same words, like that objective word. I also kind of was like, what does that mean? So I appreciate the question, but yeah, I do, and I'm sitting here a little bit nervous because I'm like, oh God, what are they going to ask housing to do, and I'm going to be all alone doing it.
No, you won't. No, you won't. Promise. You won't be
Thanks,
able to.
Todd. But like you said, I think this group is great about distributing work and everybody trying to chip in.
So,
Yeah.
If I could also, in terms of like the steering committee acting as a sounding board for us as well, as we do develop, we have certain goals, and we had talked about this, Todd and Bob, before, where we have like the overarching goals of the plan itself, and those will be very high level, very kind of general in a sense. And then as you drill into the information in each chapter, then you'll have more specific goals related to that chapter, or how they integrate with another chapter and the like. And so we'll be looking for feedback on how to prioritize those goals as we create the plan. We'll have an implementation matrix, which will then, you have a goal, you have an objective, and you have actions, and all of that will be identified, and it'll be very detailed and kind of in depth. And what we would need from you is, well, we've tried that before, it's not going to work, or how about we reframe it in this way, or that it's not turning to you and saying, here's the information, now you decide what it is. Like, we're going to be facilitating those conversations and getting the feedback and putting in what makes sense for the community based on what we've heard. So if something doesn't work, then let's figure out either how it could work, or say, you know what, it's not there.
Patty,
I just have a question about goals. It seems to be saying that you're going to set the goals. Will we then approve the goals?
We will.
Because it seems like if you're setting goals and they don't agree with what we think the goals should be, there needs to be a discussion there, no?
No, we'll be working with you on determining the goals.
Okay,
that was
my only question.
We can bring ideas to you, saying, based on what we've found in these reports, based on what we read in this, outline, based on what has been discussed in the prior master plan, even. Here's what we've heard. Let us know if you think we're on the right track.
Okay,
if
that's
we're
all
not
I
on the
needed
right
to know.
track, it's your community's goals. It's not BSC saying we think these should be your goals. Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine. Now that's clear. Thank you.
hey, Brian, before you have your hand up, but it occurred to me that you put a wonderful document together a very long time ago that talked about vision, aspiration, individual goals, and actions that would fall out of those goals. I can't find that in Dropbox, because I spent a lot of time looking for it. Do you still have that?
Yeah, I can forward that to you. Yep.
That'd be great, because that, I think, is what we're talking about.
Yeah. So, I promise this will be my last comment. It's just more about like a proposal in workflow sort of a thing. So I think that if you come to a point where you feel like there are goals that you want us to review and kind of react to and sign off on, And those may be before you've even like fully finished a draft chapter. But if there comes a point where you feel like we can't go any further until getting feedback from the committee, I feel like we should just bring it to the full committee, because I think
Yeah.
everybody who's been at these meetings is still engaged and informed on almost all the topics. I don't think it has to be necessarily handled on a task group basis. And then I would say the same thing for like a chapter, but I would just suggest that maybe what happens is if you've got a chapter or two that you want review and input on, maybe one member of the steering committee can volunteer to be the collator of feedback for that chapter, but everybody gets to review. So like maybe if it's a chapter on housing, Stasha's sort of the housing expert, but everybody may want to review the chapter and then send her their questions or edits so that when we meet with you again, Stasha is kind of like the main person instead of having, you know, a whole bunch of people sharing their feedback with you for the first time. I'm just trying to think of ways that make it easiest for you to work with what we're giving you and also organized on our end.
And make it more efficient.
Yeah. Yeah, I think
And
that
I-
would be a great workflow.
And I'll just interject there because definitely not an expert on housing, but love my town, and I'm feeling like I'm getting very knowledgeable about at least the housing world in this town. So, you know, I'm looking at like this in this committee, there's people that know, you know, it's not just housing, right? It's open space, and we've got planning board members, and we've got hopefully select board members, and we've got council of aging, like, so I do think a lot of this stuff cross pollinates. And so to have, I would love to be that housing point and do some of the dirty work that has to be done just to organize that information. But I think the group is more productive as a whole than as I would say for myself, speaking for myself, than as an individual. I don't have as much knowledge as all these faces on the screen do.
Yeah, and I, as Bob mentioned earlier, we met with Bob and Todd, I believe it was last week, and that document that Bob asked me to send out to you guys is it's a 15-page document, but it's packaged by chapter. It identifies the goals of the 2006 master plan, and then it by chapter identifies whether the steering committee or the task groups have identified goals that they would like to see in the plan, and then as well as the reports that we've worked through and what goals we find relevant for each chapter. So it lays it out very, very clearly so that you can read through the goals and kind of see how they cross over or might influence other chapters. And yeah, I think it'll be, once you see the document, you might be able to conceptualize the path forward for that. But
That should be very helpful.
yeah, less overwhelming than it seems.
Good. So it sounds like we have a plan and a process. Great.
Sounds good.
Welcome, Kia. Okay, anything else? Next meeting? Fourth Thursday again? Take a look at what that is.
27th.
Yep,
Yeah.
I'm not available then, but that doesn't matter.
Yeah, 27th.
yep. Yeah, it's on my calendar already.
Yeah, same.
Okay.
I was about to say.
Yeah, I can't do that one.
I can't either. No.
Oh dear.
Well, you have recordings, and so we'll be able to listen to them, and
Well, just a minute. Let's we
I
can
know
live with
Kia
change.
works late, but Wednesday, the 26th would work for me.
I've got a Public Waste Safety Commission on Wednesday at
Oh.
6:15. Otherwise, I'd be completely available.
the 25th is Tuesday, though. The
Does the 25th work for everybody?
No,
Which one?
25th, Tuesday.
Yes.
I can do the 25th.
Yeah.
I can do the 25th.
Okay, does it not work for anybody?
I should be able to do it.
Okay, so let's go with the 25th at 7 o'clock.
25th, 7.
Got it.
Okay, with that, do I have a motion for adjournment?
I so move.
Second,
Second, and I would hope everybody's in favor. Thank you.
Aye.
Aye.
Thanks,
Aye.
Heather.
Good
Thanks,
night.
Elena.
Thank
Have a
you.
good night,
Good
everyone.
night,
Thank you,
everybody.
guys.